Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Organic Textile Labeling in the United States. Today's presentation will be recorded and sent out to all registered participants tomorrow. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the presentation if time permits. You can type your questions into the question box on the webinar doc, and any unanswered questions will be answered afterwards via email. Today you will learn about U.S. regulations in organic textile labeling, hear about the Organic Content Standard and the Global Organic Textile Standard, which is known as GOTS, as well as learn best practices to communicate organic claims effectively. Now on to Gwendolyn Wyard from the Organic Trade Association.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for taking time to join this webinar this morning. I hope that everybody can hear me okay. It's kind of dark out there in cyberland, but it's a pleasure to be here. My goal today is to help everyone in attendance learn more about the U.S. regulations as they relate to organic fiber and textile labeling, and the different kinds of organic claims that may or may not be used, and ultimately help everyone learn how the Textile Exchange Organic Content Standard and the Global Organic Textile Standard can be used to help support accurate and compliant organic labeling claims. A little bit about the Organic Trade Association. For those that aren't familiar with us, we represent businesses across the supply chain that are engaged in organic trade. We have around 9,500 members across all 50 states. We are a unique trade association in that our members include growers, shippers, processors, certifiers, farmers associations, distributors, importers, exporters, consultants, retailers, and more. Our mission is to promote and protect organic with a unifying voice that engages its diverse membership from farm to marketplace. And when you see promote and protect organic, I'll emphasize here that that applies to food, fiber, and any other agricultural product that may be certified organic. On that note, in addition to being the primary trade association representing organic businesses in the United States, we're also one of 4 owners of a private certification standard called the Global Organic Textile Standard. Lori Wyman is going to be going into detail about the standard, but with respect to its ownership and structure, GOTS is comprised of 4 member organizations, namely the Organic Trade Association in the United States, IVN out of Germany, that's the International Association of Natural Textile Industry, the Soil Association out of the UK, and JOCA, J-O-C-A, or the Japan Organic Cotton Association. Together we work with international stakeholder organizations and experts to further develop, implement, protect, and promote the standard around the world. Now, before we jump into the details of the GOTS certification as well as the Textile Exchange certification, I want to provide some background, kind of the lay of the land, if you will, on the use of the term organic in the United States as it applies to agricultural products and specifically as it applies to fiber and textiles. So the term organic is a federally regulated term. It's regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, more specifically under a program within the USDA called the National Organic Program. You'll hear me today refer to it as the NOP, its acronym. There's one USDA organic standard in the United States. It's a floor and ceiling regulation. Third-party certifiers that are accredited by the USDA carry out the certification process, and USDA, the National Organic Program, oversees and enforces the term organic. Being a federally regulated term, it is in fact against the law to falsely use the term organic on agricultural products that are not certified. So what you're seeing here on this slide, I think a really key message that's gonna carry on through each of the slides in my portion of the presentation is that organic's a labeling term that applies to agricultural products. So agricultural being the operative word here. In general, an agricultural product that is represented or sold as organic, if the term organic appears on the front panel of a product or product label, that product must be certified. There's various claims that you'll see depending on the composition categories, whether it's 100% organic or organic, or this third category, which requires the product to be at least 70% organic. You'll see made with organic, and then it will list out up to 3 ingredients or food groups. All 3 of those claims are certified categories. But again, anytime you see the term organic that is on the front panel of a product, it must be certified. Anytime that the USDA seal is used, it must be certified. Anytime there is a claim that is making a claim of certification, such as certified organic, must be certified. There are some types of operations that are exempt or excluded from certification. We don't have time to get into all of that today, but quickly, a few common examples, and really that what makes up the bulk is a operation that is selling less than $5,000 gross annually, a retailer, or somebody like a broker that is not physically handling a product, they're simply selling it, a trader or a broker. The other thing I want to note is that it is a global program, so products can be produced anywhere in the world, but if they're sold or represented as organic, they must be, in the United States, they must be certified to the NOP or deemed equivalent under the various equivalency arrangements that we have. So again, take-home message here before we move on to the next slide is that it's a labeling term that applies to agricultural products. It's federally regulated, and there are civil penalties for using the term organic if a product is not certified. Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. The NOP regulations cover raw agricultural fiber. The organic regulations consist of production or farming standards as well as processing standards. The regulations do not include standards for processed textiles. So while the National Organic Program regulates and enforces the term organic on all agricultural products, their scope of enforcement is limited on processed textile products due to the lack of inclusion of processing standards in the regulation. So this sets up a situation that you see here in this chart, which I'll quickly run down. If we are talking about raw cotton, use of an organic claim on raw cotton, in this instance, it would have to be certified under the USDA organic standards, sold in the United States. It must be NOP certified. Couple more examples, just to cover the spectrum: cotton, wool, silk. The point here is raw agricultural fiber. Yes, there are standards. It's the farming or the production standards, and it must be certified to the National Organic Program. Once we move into processed textiles, yarn, carded wool, cotton fiber, t-shirts, mattresses, towels, on and on, this is where we don't have the processing standards, and as a result, we see the private standards coming into play. So we have the NOP certification through farming, but once you get to post-harvest and onto processing, this is where we see the private standards coming into play because we don't have those standards under the National Organic Program. Okay, next slide. So this is just a little bit of a repeat, but for those of you that are a little bit more visual, and I'll put this in the form of a question. If we're talking about cotton, if we're talking about sheep, for example, is it a may or is it a must in terms of certification under the National Organic Program? Again, this is where it's very straightforward. We've got standards for the raw agricultural fiber. This is a must under the National Organic Program. If you're going to make an organic claim, it must be certified under the National Organic Program. Now, if we go into this next slide here, this is where it gets complicated when it comes to processed textiles. Whether or not you may or must be certified under the National Organic Program is going to depend on the type of claim you make, whether or not you're using the term certified, whether or not you're using the USDA organic seal. And thankfully, the National Organic Program did release a policy that helps clarify the situation. So I'm going to quickly spend the next few slides in going through this NOP Policy Memo 1114. Certainly not how you're going to refer to it in a social setting. But in 2011, the National Organic Program released a policy memo titled Labeling of Textiles That Contain Organic Ingredients. It's a one-page document, and I invite everyone that is interested to read it in its entirety. But for the purposes of this webinar, I'll go through and I'll do a quick summary. First, the memo clarifies that textile products produced in full compliance with the production and handling standards may be NOP certified and use the USDA organic seal. So it says it's a may. Even though the processing standards aren't there, if you can do it, you may. However, because the NOP regulations were designed and written for food, certification of processed fiber products is very difficult. You'll see probably the most common example that you'll see out there, organic cotton balls. You will see USDA certified organic cotton balls, but once you get into other types of apparel, mattresses, et cetera, the processing aids and auxiliaries that are allowed for the food simply aren't there for textiles. So second, the memo recognizes and endorses the use of organic in the labeling of textile products that are certified under third-party certification, and it explicitly states that products produced in accordance with the Global Organic Textile Standard may be sold as organic in the United States. And then finally, the memo clarifies that agricultural fibers identified as organic in a textile, so if you're talking about a content standard, if agricultural fibers are identified as organic, they must be certified organic under the NOP organic regulations. It also clarifies that the NOP policies do not supersede the requirements of other federal and state laws, such as those required by the Federal Trade Commission's Textile and Wool Acts. Okay, so just drilling down a little bit more, the memo also breaks into textile products that may, in terms of how organic may be used and how organic must not be used. And so quickly, just to run through this, because this is really key information here. Textile products labeled as organic may use label claims that identify the specific types of organic fibers. Use statements identifying the percentage of organic fibers, so tying to those specific types of organic fibers that are identified. And then again, fibers identified as organic must be NOP certified organic. Now here's into the must not territory. Textile products labeled as organic must not use the USDA organic seal unless, of course, the product's NOP certified. Must not imply or lead the consumer to believe that the final product is certified under the NOP regulations, unless, of course, it is. And then finally, use a combination of both organic and non-organic sources for a single fiber that's identified as organic. So you wouldn't be able to have organic and non-organic in a product, cotton, for example, if you have indicated that the product contains organic cotton. Okay, so the NOP's policy memo provides a great deal of clarification, but from the Organic Trade Association's perspective, it still leaves space for improvement when it comes to making sure that organic claims on textiles are accurate and they're not misleading consumers. So just three important messages here in terms of the memo. It says that textile products produced in compliance with the NOP regulation may bear the USDA organic seal. It stops short of saying that all organic textiles must be produced under the NOP regulation. But the memo does confirm that products produced under the GOTS standard may be sold as organic in the United States. But again, it doesn't say that organic textiles must be produced under GOTS. So now I'd like to slightly pivot to the topic of misleading claims and look at the role of USDA's National Organic Program and the Federal Trade Commission. There's many textile products in the marketplace that are advertised as organic, yet they may only contain some organic content. So I'm talking about the difference between an organic product claim that speaks to the certification of an entire product from farming all the way through processing versus a product that simply contains organic raw agricultural product. And Ashley's going to talk more about this. But in terms of the role of the National Organic Program, they regulate and enforce organic claims on agricultural products, but they do not have enforcement jurisdiction over organic claims made on textile products unless they violate the terms of the policy that we just went through. The Federal Trade Commission, on the other hand, their job is to protect consumers by stopping unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices in the marketplace. However, historically, when it comes to products making an organic claim, they defer to the National Organic Program. So what happens if a company labels a mattress as organic, for example, but it's not actually organic? And let's say it might contain some organic cotton, but the company is marketing the entire mattress as organic. They're not using the USDA organic seal, and they're not making a certification claim. In this situation, if somebody were to submit the claim to the National Organic Program and they say it's outside of their scope, and then you were to go to the FTC and they point back to the National Organic Program, that puts us in a nowhere situation. This is where we have identified a gap in the oversight and enforcement of textile products. So over the past 6 years, next slide please, the Organic Trade Association has been urging FTC and the National Organic Program to work together to develop a policy on the term organic on products that are outside of NOP's scope of enforcement and NOP's policy statement. Specifically, we've been asking them to update the FTC Green Guides, which helps marketers avoid making environmental claims that mislead consumers. Our efforts have led to a series of actions, including a survey that FTC and USDA conducted to explore consumer perception of organic claims on textiles and other non-food products, and a follow-up expert panel that we sat on to discuss the actions that need to be taken. The results of the survey, the open comment period, and the panel were somewhat inconclusive, other than to say that more research is needed. However, next slide, please. In September of 2017, FTC did take action for the first time against a mattress company for marketing and selling an organic mattress as organic, when in fact the majority of the mattress was non-organic. There were additional charges for the use of natural latex claims and the use of its own self-awarded green certification. The charges were settled, and the company is now prohibited from making misleading claims, and they must have reliable evidence to support any claim that's made in these areas. So although FTC hasn't yet updated its green guides as we've been requesting, this case is it sets a very important precedent. And now we have this very important case to point to. So where we're at right now, well, we're continuing to urge FTC to update its green guides. The Organic Trade Association is currently working on the rollout of a best labeling practices for non-food products, and we're going to start with best practices for labeling textiles. This is something to look for in the coming months, but for now I'd like to offer a preview and share what we believe are the best organic labeling practices for textile products. This is consistent with the comments that we've been submitting to the National Organic Program and the FTC over the past, I think I said 6 years, but I know it's been 8 years. The crux of the matter, again, comes down to the difference between a product claim and a content claim. So first and foremost, OTA supports and encourages product certification under the Global Organic Textile Standard. We view that as the gold standard. If you're using the term organic to modify the name of a product, such as a mattress, the product should be third-party certified, and the standard to go to, the one that exists for full process, product and process certification, is the GOT standard. If you're making a content claim, we also strongly support and encourage third-party certification through the Textile Exchange's content standard that Ashley will talk more about. And finally, if a company chooses to make an organic claim and they don't violate NOP's labeling policy, they're making an organic claim on a textile product, then we strongly encourage the best labeling practice of limiting that claim to a content claim only, using the specific verbiage that you'll see here on the slide. So if it's on a t-shirt, contains 70% organically grown cotton. Mattress contains organically grown cotton batting. So we'll be coming out with a much more detailed version of this. I am out of time, so I am going to just let this sit out there and hopefully create some anticipation and excitement for the best labeling practices that we're going to roll out with. And I will end here. If there's more information that you need or would like to learn about on anything that you've heard here today, this is a great place to start. This is our webpage that is devoted to organic fiber and textiles. And then, of course, there's my email address. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd love to connect and love to engage in a conversation with you. So thanks so much. And now I'm going to turn over the program to Ashley Gill with Textile Exchange. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gwendolyn. Appreciate your time. As she mentioned, I am with Textile Exchange. Most of you probably are familiar with us. I'm just going to run through a quick introduction of the organization. We were founded 15 years ago, actually really to support the development of the organic cotton sector. We worked a lot on developing production and demand through the supply chain. And so we've been working with both OTA and GOTS for a long time. So we're really thankful for those partnerships. In 2010, we expanded the scope of the organization to include work on sustainability across all fiber and materials. And so that kind of has led us into the work that we're doing today. Our mission and vision are really around creating a global textile industry that protects and restores the environment and enhances lives. If you look at the first line of our mission, it's really to inspire and equip people. And we very much believe in the power of individuals to make this kind of change happen, and especially when we're working together. So collaboration and individual action, we're really committed to empowering the industry to make the best decisions possible. We have a really strong vision of industry transformation around driving an increase in the adoption of preferred fibers, enabling collective action. And then the third point is increasing integrity throughout the supply chain. And that's really where the standards and certifications that I'm going to talk about come in. And then raising awareness, we really believe in naming and faming the companies that are leading the way and using the Sustainable Development Goals as a common framework. This is just a sampling of some of our members. I've took a look through our attendee list, and I know we've got several members represented on the call today, so appreciate that. So I'm going to jump in then to talking a little bit about Textile Exchange standards. And the work that we're doing primarily is to help identify and verify content claims in the supply chain. And so all of our standards have this basic chain of custody component to them, which is to identify raw material at the input stage and track that material as it moves through the supply chain so that a brand or retailer or a consumer can be confident that that final product actually contains the claimed material. So we have some standards across, definitely in the category of organic. We also have 2 recycled standards, and most recently, the Responsible Down Standard and the Responsible Wool Standard. But we're here today to talk about organic claims, and so I want to just go through covering what the organic content standard is designed to do, and the kind of claims that the organic content standard can be used to support. So this will supplement and feed into the context that Gwendolyn laid for us. So first of all, what is the OCS? The Organic Content Standard is an independent global standard with third-party certification. So we own the standard. We don't conduct the auditing or certification. All of that is done through our third-party approved certification bodies. We're also a verification that the input fiber was organically grown. So we rely on organic national farming standards like the NOP or the European Organic Standard, the IFOAM family of standards. And once a raw material has met that standard, then our organic content standard picks up that fiber and identifies it through the supply chain. And it provides a strong level of chain of custody from the fiber to the final product. Each stage of the supply chain is required to be certified in order to be able to verify that as the product moves through, that it's being properly identified. And finally, we strongly believe in a multi-stakeholder approach. All of Textile Exchange's standards are developed and revised through international working groups that include representation from all of the affected groups. And so some of you have even sat in on those international working groups. And it's really the core
of the organic content standard as well. So specifically, some of the benefits that the OCS provides is in giving you a way to talk about how the fiber was grown at the raw material level. So it can provide you with a lot of messaging and storytelling opportunities. It's a credible certification. We have a lot of checks and balances in place to maintain the integrity of the standard, to maintain the credibility of the product as it moves through. It's also a way for you to monitor your corporate use of organic material. There's a lot of material content. The usage of organic content is not always in products that contain more than 70% or that contain really high volumes. Sometimes companies want to integrate a small amount of organic content into their product and monitor and increase that growth over time. And the OCS allows you to do that. It's a tool that is intended to verify only the organic content. And so it's a really effective tool for that purpose. It's also a good tool to maintain the knowledge that you're actually getting what you're paying for. As we all know, there are several stages in the textile supply chain, and maintaining that chain of custody or that identity of the National Organic Standard as that fiber is processed into yarn and into fabric and into a final product can be really difficult, and especially for a company to have all the information that they need to verify that. So the Organic Content Standard is a really strong tool to help you identify and verify that. It's also a really important tool to demand organic production. It helps to create demand at the production stage. The more companies that use standards like the OCS and GOTS the more the raw material suppliers get the message that organic is important, and they can continue to kind of make their goal setting in line with what the demand is. So I want to look a little bit at the chain of custody. And what happens is, as Gwendolyn mentioned, the farm is covered as an agricultural product, is covered under an organic farm certification. The Organic Content Standard does not include farm requirements. What happens is that the transaction certificate from the farm, or maybe from a trader between the farm and the gin, goes into that gin, and from that point on, certification to either either GOTS or OCS is required, and then that transaction certificate tracks the material as it moves through each stage of production. So the first layer is that a scope certificate is issued, and that is what enables a company to say that they're able to produce according to the standard, or they're able to produce verified organic content. And then the transaction certificate actually lists the individual products themselves, and that is the verification that an actual product or a specified product contains verified organic content. So what this standard does not include, it does not include any processing requirements. So at the gin, the trader, the yarn, fabric, all of those stages, there are no requirements for social, environmental, and chemical restrictions. And so it's really important to make clear that the only kind of claim that the OCS supports is organically grown content. This standard does not support claims that the final product is organic, or that the yarn is organic, or the fabric is organic. This claim is really intended to be limited to the content. And we use the language organically grown to make that really clear, that it's a reference to how the material was grown and not a reference to how the material was processed. And then just looking at this overall supply chain that you have here, we get a lot of questions pretty frequently about, what if I'm only able to get transaction certificates from the yarn stage or from the fabric stage? And that's a point that I want to say that the best case scenario is when a brand is certified, or when the seller in the last business-to-business transaction is certified, because then you know that the chain of custody has essentially been maintained. So every step that's missing from that verified chain of custody increases the risk that you as a company are taking on in the claims that you make. The next thing I want to do is just make sure that we're really clear about what we mean by the difference between a content claim and a product claim. So with the organic content standard, this verified input material goes through our chain of custody, and then we have these labeling options when all of those criteria have been met. So on the left side of this screen, these are examples of content claims. So you'll see we use the word contains, we use that phrase organically grown, and we always include the percentage. On the far left side, this is an example of maybe a claim where you're not referencing the standard, but you still want to make kind of a claim there. And then the OCS logo is present on the one that is kind of a standard claim. And then Lori is going to talk a little bit more about product claims, but GOTS is an example of a standard that does support product claims. And that is because of those additional social, environmental, and chemical requirements that are applied throughout the processing. So that's just a distinction, and she'll go into a little bit more detail about what that looks like. So just to reiterate, these are examples of claims that are not supported by the organic content standard. So even if you've got full chain of custody verification, these types of claims are not content claims, they're product claims. And so that's something that you would need a higher level of certification in order to support. And these are claims that are supported by the organic content standard. So contains organically grown content or organically grown cotton, and then the other examples that you saw before. And then just a quick word on the OCS labeling requirements. The very first requirement that we have here is that product must be certified to the seller in the last business-to-business transaction. So if you think about that previous slide that showed the full supply chain, if you've only got certification up to maybe the yarn stage or to the fabric stage, then you would not qualify for on-product OCS communication. So that requirement of the seller in the last business-to-business transaction may be the garment manufacturer, but it could also be a brand that would be required to be certified in order to label products when they're sold through a retailer. When the standard is mentioned, we require the logo to be present. We require there to be a mention of the last certified organization and the certification body that was responsible. And all of that can be found in the OCS logo use and claims guide. And then finally, we require all on-product OCS artwork to be approved by a certification body. And so you can use that really to your benefit to make sure that you're in line with our requirements before you go through the printing of your hang tags and application and all of that. If you don't qualify for for product labeling, so maybe one of the three requirements before, maybe you don't have your full supply chain certified, maybe you don't want to mention who the last certified organization is, you can still mention that you're using the standard maybe at the yarn or the fabric level in general communication. So we have included in the OCS logo use and claims guide, we have a mention of what we categorize as general communication. So these are claims that are not connected to a specific product, but rather are kind of a way for you to say what your general policy is. And with that, I just want to mention that if you have more questions about how the organic content standard is intended to be used, you can find more information on our website. I would definitely recommend taking a look at the OCS logo use and claims guide. You can also send us an email. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lori Wyman from the Global Organic Textile Standard to talk a little bit more about that certification.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello, everyone. So as Ashley said and Gwendolyn said, we are a processing standard, but we're also a content claim standard. So we include in GOTS the environmental and health criteria, chemical criteria, and social criteria. And going down here to the next slide, we will see, oh, sorry, there's more on here. This was set up this way. So same thing with OCS, that's independent third-party certification. So GOTS itself is not certifying your brand, company, manufacturing facility. That is conducted by certification agencies. We say in the US, in Europe, they say certification bodies, which is verifiable, identifiable, and traceable through the same kind of transaction certificate program that Ashley mentioned in OCS. And then going down, well, Gwendolyn already covered the USDA, so we can go down from here. We have recognition from IFOAM, the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements, and going down, we also have endorsement of Greenpeace International, which requires all of their products for their staff and volunteers to be GOTS certified. So also, if you're trying to meet your strategic development goals, GOTS can do that for you. As we move down this list, you can see that there is a whole framework of monitoring your water usage. We have evaluation tools. GOTS is a very comprehensive program that covers your environmental and recognizes the environmental initiatives that your company is taking. And I'm just going to move down quickly here because I don't want to go over time. What we have is a very prohibited and restricted list of inputs. We have an allowable and non-allowable list, which is very similar to the USDA's NOP for food. And so these are just some of the items that are not allowed. It's not only what's allowed, but what's not allowed in your products that come into your home and in your house and that you sleep on and live with every day. And next slide. So we include social criteria. It is not necessary for a GOTS certified facility to also hold a fair trade standard. If they choose to, of course they can, and that would make it very easy for the inspector at that facility to conduct the GOTS audit. But again, it would be redundant. And so we base our social criteria on the SAI social fingerprint. That's something you can look up, or I can give you more info on it. And again, our social criteria covers no discrimination, fair remuneration, no child labor, the right to form unions, etc., which are based on International Labor Organization standards. Next, please. Same thing with OCS. We have transaction certificates for every step in the supply chain. So every buyer in the supply chain only needs to concern herself or himself with the source before them. So for example, looking at this slide, say you're a dyer finisher, you need to ask for the scope certificate and the transaction certificate from the knitter or weaver of that fabric. You don't need to concern yourself as a dyer finisher with the scope certificate for the spinner, for example, because that's already been taken care of at the step before you. So every stage of the supply chain is certified and verified. They receive annual inspections and in some cases also unannounced inspections that are surprise. They're verifiable and accountable for their own facility and what they purchased. And then they prepare a transaction certificate through the help of their certifier to go on to the next step. So if I were the dyer finisher, we would be preparing a transaction certificate to give to the sewer. Next step, please. So for GOTS labeling, we only allow 70% or above for organic. We don't allow any organic fiber less than 70%. We have an organic and a made with organic. This very closely mimics the USDA NOP guidelines for food. There's organic food and made with organic. And then that balance of that fiber is closely monitored with allowable or non-allowable substances. We don't allow conventional cotton, for example. The remainder fibers will be listed in our standard, and you can see what is allowable for the balance of to make 100%. Next. So as I said, GOTS is both a process and a product claim. Organic, we certify that the cotton itself, for example, was grown organically at the farm level. So by the time you get to your t-shirt, it's proven that this was organically grown. In the United States, it's required to be grown to the USDA NOP or to IFOAM, no matter where in the world that cotton was grown. So if you're a t-shirt manufacturer and you're sourcing yarn from India, that's fine. That yarn in India had to have been grown to the USDA National Organic Program or to an IFOAM standard. So that's required. So similar to OCS, we are verifying that it was organically grown. Plus, we are verifying that every step in the supply chain met GOTS restricted standards, which we consider to be the gold standards. Next, please. Here is a checklist for retailers, which is very necessary. This is probably the most important slide for you if you are a retailer, because you want to be making claims to your customers that can be verified and backed up. You don't want any trouble. You want traceability and accountability, and GOTS can provide that for you. And it's best if you ask for the transaction certificates for the whole quantity of goods. And the buyer should be listed in box 3 on the TC, and that will state that this delivery of goods was delivered to you, your store, Laurie's retail shop, and I bought it from a GOTS certified supplier. And this is going to be your verification that you are meeting your due diligence with the GOTS standard. Next, please. I received some very funny unauthorized logos and usage. This one just came across my desk a few weeks ago, if you want to have a chuckle and look at that one. Obviously, if you look at this logo on the left, it has no certification body listed. It has no certification claim of 100%. And of course, there's no such thing as far as I know, of organic rose fiber fabric. So this is some wording that is not allowed. It has to be labeled according to the slide I showed previously, with actually listing the amount of content. Next, please. So brands and retailers, they need to be asking for their the source, their manufacturer, to have their certification agent or certification body approving their artwork. They can't just make up their artwork and slap a GOTS logo on it. It needs to be verified, and we have an easy system for that you can see on our website, and we can walk you through that. And if you can email me with questions about that. And of course, there are measures and sanctions that can happen, and even recalls have happened in the past for incorrect labeling. Next, please. So a GOTS labeled product in the retail market is a final certification procedure showing your whole entire supply chain met the GOTS standard. This is what consumers are asking for. They want to know that this is the cleanest product that they can get, and that it's been verified for not only what happened on the farm, which affects us all, because what happens on farms affects all of us with the water going downstream, etc., but also that every input that went into that garment, that product, that bed, every input that went into it has been made in the least toxic way possible and taking care of people with the social standards that we have. Next, please. So please look at our licensing and labeling guide. This is all covered. It's right on our website. It says who can use the GOTS logo and how. It talks about the business to consumer, what retailers must do, and how to market and publicize your advertisement. That's all covered in our licensing and labeling guide. Next, please. This is the end consumer can glance at a hang tag or sewn-in label They can see who the certification agency was. They can look up the license number. They can put it in their smartphone. We even have QR codes that some of the companies choose to use. You're standing in a store, you can scan the QR code with your smartphone. It will go right to the GOTS website, right to the certification of that last manufacturer in the supply chain. This is an easy way. You can put in also the license number. If this says 12345, you could type that in on the GOTS website on our directory, our public directory. It'll go right to the name of that company. This way you can avoid fraud. You can guarantee that what you're purchasing is indeed GOTS certified. Next, please. This is a new fact sheet we have, which is so much fun, especially for visual people. Are you allowed to label GOTS goods or mention it in your advertising? And it goes step to step, and you can see where you fall in and what it is you need to do. So this is also on our website under fact sheets. And I think you'll find this really helpful if you're trying to figure out where you are in the supply chain and if you're able to make any GOTS label claims. Next, please. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori. We do have a little bit of time still for questions, and so I'm going to take a skim through the questions that are coming in. And if you do have any questions, feel free to use the question box that's on the panel on your right side and type those questions in, and we will try to get through here. So the first question is on down and feather products. We manufacture down and feather products and get lots of questions from our customers about organic down. Is there a standard for organic down? We always direct them to the RDS standard, but would like to have a better answer as to why or why not down can be certified organic. So I will jump in from my perspective, and then Lori, I want to see if you've got anything else you want to add. So just the way that we would view this with the organic content standard is exactly the same as we would for cotton. So if that farm where the duck or goose was raised was certified to an organic standard, then the material that was collected off of from that farm could be tracked using the organic content standard. So that would begin to be applied at the probably at the slaughterhouse level, and then the down and feather material would follow the same chain of custody requirements as they do for the organic content standard. You could even combine OCS certification with RDS certification, so then you could track material that maybe came from a farm that was certified to both RDS or organic, or you could come up with maybe one portion of that was RDS and one portion of that was organic. And Lori, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, if you've had any experience with people using GOTS for down and feather products.
Well, I've not had any experience with organic down, with GOTS certified organic down, but it's totally possible. Of course, as you mentioned, it would be the NOP livestock standard would have to be used on the farm level, and then the whole process could be totally GOTS certified at every level the same way, but using the allowable substance list, et cetera, and meeting the social compliance parts, so on. So it's totally possible. I'm not aware of any. I'd have to look in our public database, so people are welcome to look that up or email me about it.
And Lori and Ashley, I'll jump in here too, just to piggyback on what Lori said about the National Organic Program standards. At the most basic level, the first step is that the organic standards, the USDA organic standards, they're specifically standards for crops, livestock, and processing. Absolutely the duck, the goose, it would have to be raised according to those livestock standards, 100% organic feed, animal welfare, et cetera, et cetera. Those standards are transparent. You can look them up. And then there's also a National Organic Program, the Integrity Database. So you can search to find out if there are any producers currently in the United States that might be raising organic duck, goose, or perhaps they have the capacity. But that's the square one in terms of a standard, just to be perfectly clear, is that the USDA organic standards do include livestock.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. There's a question here on, does OCS allow the blending of organic and non-organic cotton? And that is a great question. This is unique about the OCS. We do allow the OCS to be used for products that contain both organic and conventional or non-organic material of the same type. We have two different logos. So one logo is the OCS blended, one logo is the OCS 100. And the OCS blended allows you to communicate those types of claims. We do require you to list what the percentages are. The OCS 100 is only allowed to be used for products that contain at least 95%, and we do not allow blending to be present in products that use that OCS 100 logo. So in general, the standard can be used for products, but we only allow those product claims, or sorry, those logo claims to be under the OCS blended, just to make that completely clear. And then there's a similar question, want to understand the GOTS standard for blended fabric. We've seen textile mills offering 50% organic and 50% regular cotton blends. Is this not legal or allowed for GOTS certification? Lori, you want to take that one?
Yes, that's not allowed. It would have to be, first of all, in GOTS, you cannot blend organic and conventional cotton in any amount in the same product. We expect you to be using organic cotton. Conventional cotton is not allowed in any product. Even if it was 95% organic wool and 5% conventional cotton, that would not be allowed. And we require a minimum of 70% organic fiber to be in GOTS.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I would just want to make sure that I'm not skipping any. Okay, here's one. Can a GOTS certified company use the logo in TV commercials without noting their license number? So like same for in-store advertising. The packaging would have the logo and all the required information, but this would be for kind of advertising. Does GOTS have a stance on that, Lori?
Yes. Well, if you look in the licensing and labeling guide, they would need to get approval from the certification body of their source for the item, and they could run the artwork by that certifier, and they definitely want to do that. But they are allowed to, on a TV ad, for example, to use a plain GOTS logo, which does not list their certification number because it's not accompanying the product that it would be associated with. It's just saying, but they have to be careful. What we don't want to see is greenwashing. We don't want to see on a website, for example, say a company has 8 items listed on a web page and 2 of them are GOTS certified and they put a big GOTS logo at the top. That implies that everything below is GOTS certified. So a screenshot of that would be sent, of a design for that would be sent to the certification body. And that's why they follow the rules of the licensing and label guide and also the label release form. They can submit that and get that taken care of to make sure that they're promoting legally.
That's great. And the questions are flooding in now, so that's great. We probably won't be able to get to all of them. Let me just skim through. Okay, one more quick one for you, Lori. Is there a possibility to get a retail operation GOTS certified?
Yes, on a voluntary basis. In general, retailers are exempt, although if a retailer is repacking or handling their own products or altering their products in any way in their own warehouses, for example, say they're doing monograms or they're unpacking and moving things around, handling the product, then they are required to be certified. But in general, a regular store that's carrying GOTS certified products made under other brand names are not required to be certified. And people can email me. I'll be glad to. Also, that fact sheet that I showed, that big visible fact sheet, that will make clear to anyone whether or not they need to be certified.
Okay, great. And is that fact sheet, Lori, available for download on the website?
Yeah. Right on the left column under information, it says fact sheets. And yes, of course, you can download all of our fact sheets.
Okay, great. We do have a question here on what will be the label grade for 95% organic cotton and 5% conventional cotton in the OCS. And That one would not qualify for the OCS 100 because you're not allowed to blend organic and conventional under the same material type. And so you would be required to use the OCS blended logo underneath for that particular combination. There's a couple of questions then about more on the certification body side. So there's a question here that says, who actually issues the transaction and or scope certificates at each stage? And I actually want to start with you, Gwendolyn, on this point. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like at the farm level?
Let's see, for transaction certificates, actually, why don't you start with Lori? Let me think about that, because transaction certificates aren't something that is required. I think it's at the farm.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that. So the transaction certificates are actually issued by the certification agency. The person who's selling the product to the next step in the supply chain can log into a portal. All of the certification bodies or certification agencies provide portals in which you go on your computer, you put in the amount of shipment that you plan, your yarn, say you're sending yarn to a weaver, you fill in the transaction certificate form, and then within usually 48 hours, usually within a few days, the certification agency has issued the transaction certificate, and that's what goes to the weaver in this case, and then the weaver has their verification that this is indeed been vetted by the certification agency. So it's a collaboration between the business and the CB. They're actually providing this, creating this document for the next step in the supply chain.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is the same for the OCS. We use the same system where the scope certificates are required to be in place, and then the transaction certificates are issued based on the products, and all of that is done between that individual company and their responsible certification body. And then
I think that goes back to the farm in terms of the original certificate that's born from the actual production stage of it and moves on into that process.
Okay, and we do have a comment from one of the certification bodies that's actually on the call. Thank you very much, Angela. That no TCs are required at the farm level, and so that that term transaction certificates, I think they can be used at the farm level, but they're not always there. So the TCs are really something that gets picked up through the supply chain. Let me, just skim the questions to make sure. I'm kind of jumping around, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So here's kind of a little bit more of a technical one, Lori, for you. GOTS certification, when it's held by the manufacturer, is it specific to the batch of finished products that were reviewed at the time of certification? Or can it be used to cover subsequent batches if the manufacturer confirms that they were made from the same materials in the same method?
Yeah, so at that stage, what gets certified is the service that manufacturer is providing. Their scope certificate will state that they're certified to weave. They're a weaver. They're certified to weave GOTS goods. The inspector on site will conduct a mass balance test, choosing one product or maybe two to do a mass balance test. But that facility is showing that they are capable of separating their GOTS products from the non-GOTS, not having commingling. They're using correct contact surface cleaners. They're not fumigating the facility. They're not making a toxic environment, and all of the social components that go with a workplace go along with this too, as well as environmental concerns. So all of that is involved, but definitely it's not about just one product. If they fill in a product specification form for every item, and that's what gets listed on the GOTS directory and our public directory. So that's what gets looked at. It's kind of a little different frame of reference of how we look at it.
Thanks for that, Lori. There's one more question, and this is going to be the last question we're able to get to. There's still some that we weren't able to get to and we'll follow up through email. But this one is, can we use OCS 100 for GOTS products? And I'm assuming that this is for communication. And this is, I think, a really important point to make, just the distinction between the OCS and GOTS. The OCS only includes the verification of the content, and so they're really not the same standard. We, as owners of the organic content standard, recognize the GOTS standard as a qualified input. So for example, if a yarn mill is certified to GOTS and they're able to issue a GOTS transaction certificate, an OCS fabric mill can accept that. They would not be able to communicate any GOTS related claims. It would essentially become an OCS claim. But because GOTS is a stronger standard, we accept that, but it doesn't work the other way around. So GOTS does not accept OCS because we don't have those same social, environmental, and chemical requirements in place. And so if a facility is GOTS certified and they want to issue an OCS product, they would need to add OCS to their scope in order to label any products according to the OCS. But GOTS products can be accepted in the supply chain as an OCS input. Lori, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, in some cases, a company will choose to have both certifications. They may have some products in their line that can't meet GOTS but meet OCS, or they may want to promote that they're using both standards. But then they, as you said, the GOTS might supersede the OCS, but not the other way around at any step. Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, we are 1 minute past. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone very much for being on today's webinar. Really appreciate all the great questions that came in. We'll try to follow up with some of those throughout. And I want to say a huge thank you to Gwendolyn Wyard from Organic Trade Association and Lori Wyman from Global Organic Textile Standard for presenting with us today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a reminder that the presentation will be sent out within 24 hours along with the recording to everyone. So thank you. Have a great day.
Wonderful. Thanks.